How I came to know one of the greatest recording artists that I feel it particularly in the R&B field, and maybe one of the greatest artists of all fields. I came to know James Brown. Uh, First of all, when he was always one of my idols, of course, before I became a radio announcer. And when I was recording for Chess Records, his he recorded for King Records, which was right across the street on Michigan Avenue. And then after recording for Chess Records, a couple of records that I did for them, I decided out of the clear blue that I wanted to be a radio announcer. So I took off and moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and became a disc jockey. And then with all the various places that I went throughout the states, like such as that I was a disc jockey in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Omaha, Nebraska, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Michigan, Flint, Michigan, Saginaw, Michigan, also in Pensacola, Florida, and other places. I had an opportunity to two times at least that I can remember of meeting one of the greatest artists that the world has ever known, and that was in the person of James Brown. And James Brown, a lot of people didn't. He had a, I think, reason what I admired about James Brown. And I think this is not only was he so good, but himself in terms of dancing on the stage but his band was one of the best bands that you would ever want to see. One thing about his band was so good that he never had what they call dead air in music. And when you're on the radio, it's one record right behind the other. Well, he had one song right behind the other. He never stopped, and he performed for at least 2 hours on the stage, and that is moving and dancing and singing. So he was just a great artist, but behind the scenes, he was a very strict person. It was more like when I saw him and was with him in his dressing room at one time, and then another time I saw him on the plane in Toledo, Ohio, and but it was in his dressing room, and I can't remember where that was at this time. But he was very strict, and people that would come wanted to talk to Mr. Brown is how they referred to him. It was Mr. Brown. It was not James or James Brown. It was Mr. Brown. So that he demanded that kind of respect, and he was the kind of person that if you, and as far as the band members, and I think he did that to have good control of the band. Being in a band myself before, while I was with Chess Records and before, is you got to have a tight ring on the musicians. If not, it's kind of like running the government. It just goes, you end up with all kinds of problems because there's no discipline. So his main thing was discipline, and if as an example, if the one of the band members or any of the band members messed up on a beat, they had to pay a fine. If you were playing the saxophone or the drums or piano or organ or what have you, any one of the instruments, then you paid a fine if you missed a note. So this is one of the strict ways. And then you better not be. You better be. If you were when you weren't even playing in the band, you better have good account of yourself. He made sure that you stayed out of trouble while you played with his band, because that could cause you to lose your job. So I that was really a great learning experience, and that really gave me more respect for him, because I knew that I understood it, but I thought it was rough and harsh at the time. but I understood it because if you don't have, as I said, discipline and control, sort of a lack of control over your band, then you'll have no band, and you'll end up having members doing all kinds of things, and you end up it ends up messing up your sound and all alike.
Do you think he was as strict on himself as he was with other people? And do you think that's why he always had to dress a certain way? Was he critical of himself and his own image, do you think?
Well, he was pretty. I don't know if you go so far as to say he was critical of himself, but he kept himself at even though he had some troubles himself. As after, of course, he went to prison as a young boy, and then later on as a man, he had some problems himself. And but I think I don't think he was so hard on himself. I think his whole thing was that he knew by growing up the way he grew up, because he basically raised himself. He knew that he was street smart, and he knew that you had to be tough on these guys, or otherwise they are just gonna go wild.
Mm-hmm. So where do you think, if his fashion sense and his image didn't come from being strict on himself, do you think he just enjoyed being flashy? So it wasn't about being critical; it was just who he was.
Well, I think I think it was not so much being critical, but it was the thing because he demanded he wanted the best band in the whole land, as they say. Mm-hmm. They say he wanted one of the best bands and the tightest bands, and he demanded some of the best musicians that could play R&B music. Mm-hmm. And so he knew he had to do that to be strict and demand discipline in order to achieve that.
Okay. So where was his inspiration coming from then personally for his image?
I think it came from I think it came from when he was a little boy, and as it was said, he was raised in a whorehouse, or you can call it a prostitute house, for more lack of a better word, or the best word. But he had heard of other musicians, and he thought that, hey, this is something I can do. And I think he learned a lot from a guy that he met. It was kind of like when Ray Charles was growing up. He met this guy playing piano the same way with James Brown. Ray Charles met a guy that showed him how to play a piano when he was a kid. Even though Ray Charles was blind, he was somewhere in the age range of around 6 to 10 years old or so. And James Brown was pretty much in that same. He learned how to play the piano from a guy. And then he says he learned to love music. And then as he went to prison as a teenager, he met this guy in jail, and he started playing. That's where he got his desire and his inspiration and singing and doing things in prison, and he ended up playing with Hank Ballard and Bobby Bird and people like that. And before it was over, Bobby Bird was playing for him because he ended up going on his own. So he found out this is something I can do, and he wanted to be the best that ever did it.
Okay. And he wasn't he?
Yeah, I believe. There's an old saying that I used on radio when I was a radio announcer. He's the best that ever did it and got away with it.
Thank you, Papa Jack.
All right, you're welcome.